The Great Hall of the Galactic Federation had never seen such chaos. Ambassador Zethkar stood at his crystal podium, his translucent body shimmering with stress patterns that his species had not displayed in over 1,000 years. Around him, delegates from 200 worlds spoke in hushed whispers, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of worry that filled the massive chamber. High Delegate Morthak raised his ancient staff, and silence fell across the assembly. The old being from Andromeda had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, had mediated wars that consumed entire star systems, and had brought peace to conflicts that seemed impossible to resolve. But today, even his weathered face showed concern. "We are here," Morthak began, his voice carrying across the hall without need for amplification, because of disturbing reports from the Tau Ceti system, reports that concerned the species known as humans. A ripple of dismissive sounds came from several delegates. The Vorthan representative, a being of pure energy, flickered with what could only be described as amusement. Another aggressive species causing trouble? The energy being asked. "We have dealt with countless warlike races before." Zethkar stepped forward, his crystalline form catching the light from the chamber's artificial suns. "This is different," he said, his voice carrying a tremor that made several nearby delegates lean back. "I have seen the footage. I have spoken with survivors. What the humans did in Tau Ceti was not mere warfare." The massive screens around the chamber flickered to life. Images appeared that made many delegates look away in shock. The footage showed human soldiers moving through what had once been a Kretal military base. But these were not the calculated movements of professional warriors. These humans moved with a purpose that seemed to transcend normal military doctrine. Dr. Lisa Morgan, the human cultural liaison, sat in the observer section. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her face showed the careful neutrality that diplomats learned to wear. Next to her, Captain Jake Sullivan remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the screens, showing his species in action. "As you can see," Zethkar continued, his voice growing stronger, the human response to the Kretal attack was swift and total. Within 72 hours, the entire Kretal civilization had been eliminated from the galaxy. The Andromedan delegate, a being of living metal, stood up with a sound like grinding gears. "Impossible," it declared. The Kretal had fortified worlds, battle fleets, and defensive systems that had stood for millennia. No single species could accomplish such destruction so quickly. Captain Sullivan finally moved, turning his head slightly to look at the Andromedan delegate. He said nothing, but something in his gaze made the metal being step back. Dr. Morgan cleared her throat and stood. "May I address the assembly?" she asked. Morthak nodded, and the human woman walked to the central speaking area. She was small compared to most of the delegates, but her presence seemed to fill the space around her. "The Kretal made a mistake," she said simply. "They attacked our mining colonies. Yes. They destroyed our facilities. Yes. They killed our workers. Yes. But then they did something that changed everything." The hall fell silent. Even the constant hum of translation devices seemed to quiet. "They took our children," Dr. Morgan continued. "They captured human children and began using them for experiments. They broadcast these experiments to our colonies, thinking it would make us surrender faster." A delegate from the Peaceful Worlds Alliance, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish, drifted forward. "But surely your military command could have negotiated, could have offered prisoner exchanges or territorial concessions." Dr. Morgan shook her head. "You don't understand. When the Kretal harmed our children, they didn't just attack our species. They triggered something that we call species rage. It's not anger. It's not even hatred. It's something deeper." The screens changed, showing more footage. This time, it showed human ships arriving at Kretal worlds. But these weren't the usual battle formations that other species used. The human fleets moved with a coordination that seemed almost organic, as if they were not separate ships but parts of a single, massive organism. The Eternal Chorus tried to intervene, Zethkar said, his voice now barely above a whisper. "The godlike entity that has stopped wars across the galaxy for 10,000 years. Its telepathic powers have ended conflicts that consumed entire sectors. But when it tried to calm the human fleets, something unprecedented happened. The assembly waited. The Eternal Chorus contacted me directly. Zeph Carr continued. It told me that human minds, when in this state, are completely closed to outside influence, not just resistant, completely closed. The chorus described it as trying to stop a force of nature. Captain Sullivan stood up slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. He was not a large man by human standards, but something about the way he moved made the massive aliens around him seem to shrink back. "May I speak?" he asked. Morthak nodded. Sullivan walked to the center of the chamber. He looked around at the gathered delegates. His expression calm, but somehow terrifying in his complete lack of emotion. "My species has a saying," he began. "There are wolves and there are sheep and there are sheepdogs. Most species in this galaxy are sheep. Some are wolves. But humans are sheepdogs. We exist to protect the flock." He paused, let his words sink in. The Kreetal thought they were wolves attacking sheep. They didn't realize they had attacked the sheepdog's pups. The silence in the chamber was absolute. "What happens now?" asked the Vorthan delegate. Sullivan looked directly at the energy being. "Now you all learn to be very careful about who you choose to attack. Because if you harm the innocent, especially children, you won't be fighting a species anymore. You'll be fighting a force of nature." As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Emergency signals from across the galaxy flooded the communication systems. The screen showed dozens of distress calls, all with the same message. Human fleets were moving 3 months earlier. The morning sun of Tau Ceti painted the human mining colony in warm golden light. Children ran through the streets on their way to school, while their parents headed to the deep mines that had made this world profitable for the Federation. Tony Martinez stood on his office balcony, watching the daily routine that had become as familiar as breathing. As mining supervisor, Tony had seen this colony grow from a few temporary shelters to a thriving community of 50,000 humans. Families had made homes here. Children had been born here. This was not just a mining operation anymore. This was home. Commander Alex Parker walked up the steps to Tony's office, his military uniform crisp despite the early hour. Alex ran the small defense force that protected the colony, though in 20 years of operation, they had never faced a real threat. "Morning reports look good," Alex said, joining Tony on the balcony. "The new mining equipment is working better than expected. We should hit our quotas 3 weeks early." Tony smiled. "The families will be happy. Early completion means early bonuses." He pointed to a group of children playing in the park below. "My daughter Emma is down there somewhere. She's excited about the school science fair next week." Alex nodded. His own son Danny was probably in that same group of kids. Life on Tau Ceti was good, peaceful, safe. The first explosion changed everything. The blast came from the Eastern District, a bright flash followed by a sound that shook the ground. Tony and Alex ran to the communication center as alarms began wailing across the colony. "Report." Alex shouted to his communications officer. "Ships coming out of hyperspace." The officer replied, his voice tight with fear. "Dozens of them. They're not responding to our signals." The screen showed vessels unlike anything in the Federation database. Long, insect-like ships with multiple limbs extending from their hulls. They moved in perfect formation, like a swarm. "Kreetal," Alex whispered. "But they're supposed to be in the outer rim. What are they doing here?" The answer came quickly. The alien ships began firing on civilian targets first. Not the mining facilities. Not the defense stations. The schools. The hospitals. The residential areas where families lived. Tony grabbed the emergency broadcast system. "All civilians to the underground shelters. This is not a drill. All civilians to the shelters now." Alex was already running toward his command post. "All defense units, battle stations. Protect the civilian evacuation routes." The human defense force was small, but well-trained. They had modern weapons and good tactics. But they were facing an invasion force 10 times their size. The Kreetal ships kept coming, wave after wave of insect-like vessels that filled the sky. The battle lasted 6 hours. Alex's forces fought with everything they had, but it was not enough. The Kreetal landed ground troops, creatures that looked like giant mantises with weapons grafted to their limbs. They moved through the colony with terrible efficiency. Tony watched from the command bunker as his world burned. The mining equipment was destroyed. The homes were leveled. But worst of all, the Kreetal were capturing humans. Not killing them, capturing them. Why are they taking prisoners? Tony asked. Alex's face was grim. I don't think they're prisoners. The truth came an hour later. The Kreetal began broadcasting on all frequencies. The images they sent made Tony fall to his knees in horror. They had taken the children first. Emma Martinez, Danny Parker, dozens of other young humans were being held in transparent containers aboard the Kreetal ships. Machines were attached to them. Experiments were being conducted. Humans of Tau Ceti. The Kreetal message said in perfect Federation standard, your young provide excellent test subjects. Their fear responses are particularly interesting. Surrender your remaining forces, or we will continue our research. Alex stood frozen, watching his son scream silently in the alien laboratory. Around him, his remaining soldiers were breaking down as they saw their own children being tortured. Commander, one of his officers said, tears streaming down his face. What do we do? Alex couldn't answer. He couldn't think. The sight of Danny in that machine had shattered something inside him. That's when Captain Ben Foster arrived. The rescue ship New Horizons dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Ben had been making a routine supply run when he received a distress call. He expected to find a mining accident or maybe equipment failure. He found hell instead. This is Captain Foster to Tau Ceti Control. He broadcast. What is your status? Alex's broken voice came through the static. We're gone, Ben. They took the children. They're experimenting on them. Ben felt something cold settle in his stomach. Who took them? Kreetal. They're broadcasting it to make a surrender. Ben accessed the broadcast signal. For 30 seconds, he watched human children being tortured by alien scientists. When he finally spoke again, his voice was different, colder. Alex, how many Kreetal ships are there? Maybe 60. Ben, there's nothing you can do. Your ship isn't armed for combat. I'm not staying to fight, Ben said. I'm going home. Home. To Earth. To tell them what happened here. Ben Foster jumped to hyperspace, leaving the burning colony behind. But he carried something with him that would change the galaxy forever. He carried the truth about what the Kreetal had done to human children. By the time Ben reached Earth, the footage had spread to every human world. Military commanders watched in silence. Politicians saw their careers end in the space of a single broadcast. Mothers and fathers across human space looked at the images and felt something they had never experienced before. Admiral Karen Hughes was in a meeting with the Federation Council when her aide handed her the data pad. She watched the footage once, then stood up without a word. Where are you going? Asked the Federation representative. To war, Karen replied simply. The Kreetal had made a fatal mistake. They thought they were fighting a small human colony. They thought they were facing a local defense force. They thought they were dealing with another weak species that would surrender to protect their young. They were wrong. They had attacked the children of a species that would burn the galaxy to ash before allowing harm to come to their young. The Kreetal had just declared war on humanity itself, and humanity was about to show them what that meant. Admiral Karen Hughes stood in the war room aboard the massive battle station Earthshield, watching screens that showed human fleets across the galaxy. She had commanded ships for 30 years, had fought pirates and rebels, had kept the peace in dozens of systems. But she had never seen anything like what was happening now. Every human military base was reporting the same thing. Soldiers were volunteering for combat duty faster than they could be processed. Ships that had been in maintenance were being rushed back to service. Retired veterans were returning to active duty without being asked. General Rick Thompson entered the war room, his face grim. The mobilization is complete, he said. Every human world has responded. Every fleet commander is requesting permission to engage. Karen looked at the tactical display. Red dots showed human forces from across Federation space, all moving toward one destination. Kreetal territory. How many ships? She asked. All of them, Rick replied. Every human vessel capable of spaceflight, military, civilian, cargo haulers, even pleasure craft, they're all heading for Kretal space. Dr. Paul Anderson, the fleet's military psychologist, looked up from his data pad. Admiral, I've been monitoring communication from our ships. The psychological profiles are unlike anything I've seen before. Explain, Karen said. Paul pulled up charts on the main screen. Normal combat psychology shows elevated stress, increased adrenaline, fear responses mixed with aggression. But our people aren't showing any of those patterns. What are they showing? Nothing, Paul said quietly. Complete emotional flatline, except for one thing. Absolute determination. It's like they've shut down every emotion except the need to complete their mission. Lieutenant Amy Crawford, fresh from the academy, listened from her station near the communications console. She had studied military history, had read about great battles and heroic stands. But nothing in her training had prepared her for what she was witnessing. Dr. Anderson, Amy asked, "What does that mean? How can they show no emotion?" Paul turned to her, his expression troubled. It means they're not thinking like individuals anymore. They're thinking like a single organism with one purpose. Karen activated the fleet-wide communication system. Thousands of ship commanders appeared on the screen, their faces showing the same calm determination that Paul had described. All fleet commanders, Karen began, we are implementing Protocol 7. Amy had never heard of Protocol 7. She looked around the room and saw that even some of the senior officers seemed confused. But the ship commanders on the screen showed no surprise. They simply nodded. Acknowledge came the response from hundreds of voices in perfect unison. Karen cut the communication and turned to Amy. "Lieutenant, you have questions?" "Yes, ma'am." "What is Protocol 7? Rick answered. "It's something we hoped we would never need to use. It's a complete mobilization of human military forces for species survival warfare." "Species survival?" Dr. Anderson stepped forward. "Lieutenant, what do you know about human evolution?" Amy thought back to her academy classes. "We evolved from hunters. We develop complex social structures to protect our young." "Correct. But there's something else. Humans are one of the few species that will sacrifice everything to protect children, not just their own children. All children." Karen activated another screen. It showed intercepted communications from across the galaxy. Alien species were reporting strange behavior from human populations. "Look at these reports," Karen said. "Human civilians on Vega Prime have shut down all entertainment facilities and are working around the clock to build supply ships. Human traders in the Centauri system have abandoned their cargo runs and are ferrying weapons to our fleets. Human scientists on research stations have stopped their projects and are designing new weapons." Amy studied the reports. "They're all doing this voluntarily?" "More than voluntarily," Paul said. "They're doing it instinctively. When humans perceive a threat to children, especially their own species' children, they undergo a psychological transformation. Individual concerns disappear. Personal safety becomes irrelevant. Only the mission matters." Rick pulled up tactical displays showing Kretal space. The aliens think they're facing a human military response. They're preparing for conventional warfare. They have no idea what's actually coming. "What is coming?" Amy asked. Karen looked at her young officer. "The awakening of something the galaxy has never seen before. When humans truly unite for war, we don't fight like other species. We don't have political divisions or competing interests. We become a single force with one mind." On the screen, more reports came in. Human colonies were sending every available resource to the war effort. Families were saying goodbye to fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters without complaint. Children were taking over jobs so adults could fight. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kretal homeworld. Put it through." The screen showed a massive insect-like creature with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked as it spoke. "This is Hive Queeness Gatera of the Kretal Empire. We demand you halt your military movements immediately." Karen stepped forward. "This is Admiral Hughes of the Human Fleet. You have harmed our children. Your young are excellent test subjects. We will continue our research unless you withdraw. No, Karen said simply. The alien queen's mandibles clicked faster. You cannot defeat us. We have conquered 17 star systems. Our fleets have never been defeated. You attacked our children, Karen repeated. So you will sacrifice your entire species for a few young? Karen looked directly into the alien's compound eyes. Yes. The transmission cut off. Around the war room, officers went back to their tasks with the same calm determination that had settled over the entire human species. Amy watched the tactical display as human ships continued to converge on Kretal space. Admiral, how do we know we can win? Karen turned to her. Lieutenant, we're not trying to win. We're trying to remove a threat to our children. There's a difference. I don't understand. Dr. Anderson answered. Winning implies there might be acceptable losses. Removing a threat means you continue until the threat no longer exists, no matter the cost. Rick added, the Kretal are fighting to expand their territory. We're fighting to protect our young. They can retreat. They can negotiate. They can surrender. We can only complete our mission. As if to emphasize his point, reports began coming in from the first human ships entering Kretal territory. They weren't following standard military protocols. They weren't trying to capture territory or secure resources. They were methodically destroying everything Kretal. It's beginning, Karen said quietly. The eternal chorus had existed since before most civilizations learned to count time. It was neither machine nor organic being, but something beyond both. For 10,000 years, it had served as the galaxy's ultimate peacekeeper, using its vast telepathic powers to calm the minds of warring species and bring conflicts to peaceful ends. Now, as human fleets approached Kretal space, the eternal chorus prepared to do what it had done countless times before. It reached out with its consciousness, seeking the minds of the human commanders, ready to flood them with feelings of peace and understanding. What it found instead made it recoil in something that might have been fear. The human minds were not simply closed to its influence. They were beyond its reach entirely. The chorus had encountered resistant minds before, species with natural telepathic defenses or strong-willed individuals who could fight its suggestions. But this was different. The human minds had transformed into something it could not understand or touch. On the Kretal homeworld of Terra Prime, Hive Queen Terra watched the defensive preparations with growing confidence. Her world was protected by energy shields that had never been broken. Orbital battle stations surrounded the planet like a deadly crown. Underground bunkers could shelter her people for decades. The humans cannot possibly breach our defenses, she told her war council. We have had centuries to prepare these fortifications. But deep in the planet's crust, sensors were already detecting something impossible. Human ships were not approaching in standard battle formations. They were not trying to establish supply lines or staging areas. They were simply coming, all of them, in a massive wave that filled space from one edge of the system to the other. Colonel Steve Walsh commanded the human stealth destroyer Ghost Protocol, one of the first ships to enter Kretal space. His mission was reconnaissance, to gather intelligence on enemy positions and defenses. But as he watched the sensors, he realized intelligence gathering was pointless. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting over 3,000 human vessels in this system alone. They're not waiting for orders. They're just attacking whatever they find. Steve nodded. He felt the same compulsion driving him. The image of those children in the alien laboratories had burned into his mind, just as it had burned into the mind of every human who had seen it. There was no room for strategy or careful planning. There was only the mission. All ships, he broadcast on the human frequency, eliminate all Kretal presence in the system. The response came from hundreds of ships at once. Acknowledged. Captain Nina Ross piloted her fighter squadron to the orbital defenses of a Kretal military world. The alien weapons were powerful and accurate, designed to stop conventional attacks. But the human fighters were not flying conventional attack patterns. They were flying like they had nothing to lose because they didn't. Blue Squadron, this is Blue Leader. Nina called to her pilots. Target the weapon platforms. Don't worry about return fire. Blue leader, those platforms will tear us apart if we fly straight at them. One of her pilots responded. Then we die completing the mission, Nina replied calmly. The children come first. Her squadron followed her into what should have been a suicide run. Half of them died in the first pass. The survivors continued their attack runs, flying through defensive fire that should have been impossible to survive. They destroyed every orbital platform, clearing the way for the larger ships. The Eternal Chorus tried again to reach the human minds. This time, it focused all of its power on a single human commander, Admiral Hughes herself. For a moment that lasted an eternity, the cosmic entity pressed against the barriers around her consciousness. Admiral Hughes paused in her command duties, feeling something vast and alien trying to enter her thoughts. For just an instant, she sensed the presence of the Eternal Chorus, felt its desire to bring peace and understanding to the conflict. "No," she said quietly. The word carried more than refusal. It carried the absolute determination of a species that had committed itself completely to its mission. The Eternal Chorus retreated, shaken by an encounter with minds that had moved beyond its influence. On SCK Prime, the first human ships began breaking through the planetary shields. The Kreetal had expected bombardment from orbit, a siege that would give them time to negotiate or call for help. Instead, human ships crashed through the energy barriers like they were made of paper, accepting catastrophic damage to their own vessels in exchange for creating openings for the ships behind them. Hive Queen SCK watched in growing horror as her impregnable defenses crumbled in hours rather than months. "How are they doing this?" she demanded of her military advisors. "No species fights like this. No species accepts such losses." Her chief military officer, a scarred veteran of dozens of campaigns, could only stare at the tactical displays. "My queen, they're not fighting like a species. They're fighting like a force of nature." The human ground forces landed on SEK Terra Prime without establishing secure landing zones or supply lines. They simply came down wherever they could find space, regardless of enemy resistance. Each unit had the same mission: eliminate all Kreetal presence on the planet. Colonel Walsh led his Marines to the underground city beneath the planetary capital. The Kreetal had retreated here, expecting the tunnels and fortified positions to slow down any ground assault. But the humans moved through the defenses like they were barely there, accepting casualties that would have stopped any other species. "Colonel," one of his sergeants called out, "we're taking heavy losses in Section 7. "Continue the advance," Walsh replied. "Sir, we might want to call for support or wait for reinforcements." Walsh turned to look at his sergeant. "The mission comes first. The children come first. Everything else is secondary." Above ground, Captain Ross watched as the last Kreetal defensive positions fell. The battle for SEK Terra Prime had lasted exactly 72 hours. A planet that had been considered unconquerable was now under complete human control. But the humans were not stopping to secure their conquest. They were already moving deeper into Kreetal space, following the same systematic approach they had used here. Hive Queen SEK Terra made one final transmission before her capture. It was broadcast to every Kreetal world, a warning that came too late. "The humans are not like other species," she said, her voice filled with something that might have been regret. "We thought we were fighting warriors. We were wrong. We awakened something that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped, and will not rest until we are gone." The transmission ended. Across Kreetal space, other Hive Queens received the message and felt the first touch of true fear their species had known in 1,000 years. The humans were coming, and divine intervention could not save anyone from their rage. Ambassador Zethkar stood before the Galactic Federation assembly once again, but this time the Great Hall was completely silent. Every delegate sat frozen in their seats, staring at the final images from Kreetal space. Where once there had been 17 star systems teeming with life, now there was nothing but empty space and drifting debris. The human fleets completed their mission in 14 standard days, Zethkar said, his crystalline voice cracking with emotions his species rarely displayed. 14 days to eliminate an entire civilization that had existed for over 3,000 years. High Delegate Morthak leaned forward on his ancient staff. In all his centuries of mediating galactic conflicts, he had never seen anything like this. Complete elimination? Surely some Kreetal survived on remote worlds or in deep space. No, Zefkar replied. The humans tracked down every ship, every station, every outpost. They found Kreetal hiding in asteroid belts and nebulae. They followed them to the edge of dark space. They erased every trace of the species from existence. Dr. Lisa Morgan stood up in the observers section. May I explain what happened from our perspective? Morthak nodded, though several delegates made sounds of fear at the thought of hearing a human speak. Dr. Morgan walked to the center of the chamber. She looked smaller than ever, surrounded by the massive alien delegates, but her presence filled the space with energy that made everyone uncomfortable. You need to understand something about human psychology, she began. We evolved as pack hunters who protected our young above all else. But we're also one of the few species that extends this protection instinct beyond our immediate offspring. Elder Vashti of the Pacifist Alliance floated forward on his anti-gravity platform. But Dr. Morgan, surely rational thought can overcome instinct. Your leaders could have negotiated. You're thinking like your species, Dr. Morgan replied. When human children are threatened, we don't think rationally anymore. We think like a single organism with one purpose: eliminate the threat completely. Captain Jake Sullivan finally stepped forward. He had remained silent through most of the session, but now every eye in the chamber turned to him with a mixture of fear and fascination. The Kreetal made a mistake that many species make, he said, his voice calm and steady. They thought they were fighting humans the way you fight other species, with politics and territories and negotiated settlements. The Andromedan delegate, its metallic form gleaming under the chamber lights, spoke up. How else would one fight a war? Sullivan looked directly at the metal being. They weren't fighting a war. They were fighting evolution itself. Millions of years of human development designed to protect children. When they harmed our young, they triggered something that goes deeper than thought or reason. The screens around the chamber lit up with new reports. Communications from across the galaxy were flooding in, all carrying the same basic message. Every species was implementing emergency protocols to avoid any action that might be perceived as threatening to human children. Look at these reports, Zefkar said, gesturing to the displays. The Centauri Empire has passed laws making it illegal to harm any young being within their territory. The Vegan Trade Union has banned all research on juvenile development. 3 separate star nations have requested human protection for their colonies. Dr. Morgan nodded. What you're seeing is the galaxy learning a very important lesson. Humans will go to any length to protect children. Not just human children. All children. But surely this level of response is excessive, protested a delegate from the Scientific Consortium, a being that looked like a floating brain in a crystalline sphere. The destruction of an entire species for the harm of a few dozen young. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Captain Sullivan turned to face the brain creature, and something in his expression made several nearby delegates step back. Let me be very clear, Sullivan said. If anyone, anywhere in this galaxy, harms children in front of humans, this will happen again. If anyone uses children as weapons or test subjects or bargaining chips, this will happen again. If anyone threatens a young of any species under human protection, this will happen again. The silence that followed was absolute. Elder Vashti finally spoke. Captain Sullivan, what you're describing sounds like a threat against the entire galaxy. No, Sullivan replied. It's a promise to the entire galaxy. As long as you protect the innocent, especially children, humans will be your allies. We'll help you, trade with you, learn from you. But if you cross that line, he gestured to the screen, showing the empty space where Kreetal worlds used to be. High Delegate Morthak stood up slowly. The Federation will need to establish new protocols for dealing with humanity. Already done, Dr. Morgan said, pulling up a document on the central display. The Human Protection Doctrine has been submitted to all member worlds. It's very simple. Don't harm children. Don't use children as test subjects. Don't threaten children to gain tactical advantage. Follow these rules, and humans will be peaceful neighbors. The Vorthan delegate, still flickering with nervous energy, asked the question everyone was thinking. And if we don't follow these rules? Captain Sullivan answered, then you become Kreetow. Zethkar stepped forward once more. The Federation Council will vote on the Human Protection Doctrine immediately. All in favor? Every hand, claw, tentacle, and appendage in the chamber rose without hesitation. Motion carried unanimously, Morthak announced. Let it be recorded that as of this day, the following law is enacted across all Federation space. No harm shall come to the children of any species. Any violation of this law will be considered an act of war against humanity itself. As the delegates began filing out of the chamber, whispered conversations filled the air. Plans were being made to protect children not just from harm, but from any situation that might upset human sensibilities. New trade routes were being planned to avoid any appearance of child labor. Research projects involving young beings were being canceled or moved to human oversight. The galaxy was learning to live with humanity's unique moral code. Dr. Morgan remained in the chamber as it emptied, looking up at the Great Seal of the Federation. Captain Sullivan approached her. Do you think they understand? She asked. They understand enough, Sullivan replied. They understand that some lines should never be crossed. And if someone does cross them? Sullivan looked at the empty chamber, then at the screen still showing the void where Kreetow space used to be. Then the galaxy will remember why humans are the shepherds, and everyone else are the sheep. Outside the chamber, across hundreds of worlds, a new era was beginning. An era where children will be protected not by law or tradition, but by the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, humanity was watching. And if those children were harmed, humanity would come with the fury of evolution itself behind them. The galaxy had learned its lesson, the hard way.